Hey guys, DC Network here, coming at you with another video. The original Ben 10 had a wide variety of iterations before landing on the final product that we got in the original series, anywhere from different heroes being summoned from the multiverse to aliens being summoned by a watch. The original Ben 10 had a wide variety of ideas, and while one day I do want to go through all of these ideas, today in this video, I wanted to look at the original 10 aliens that were initially conceptualized when the show was being worked on, because they're actually rather different in a lot of cases from the 10 aliens that we got in the original series. But first and foremost, before we get into that, we need to look at Ben Tennyson himself, because this will come into play later when we look at these aliens and what the Omnitrix symbol looks like. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say real quick that all of these designs were made by Stephen E. Gordon when he was working on the original Ben 10. I believe he was later taken off of the project in favor of going in a different art direction, but once again, these designs were all made by him. So first of all, here is a look at Ben Tennyson during pre-production. Obviously, he is distinctively different from the Ben Tennyson that we had in the original series, and you can see that this Ben Tennyson has a bit of a red and orange theme going on with him, as opposed to the green coloring that we associate with the Ben 10 franchise. You can see on his wrist is the Omnitrix, or this iteration of it, if you will, and quite frankly, it kind of looks like a parasite to me. It looks like a parasite that has attached itself to Ben's wrist, as opposed to an alien device, an alien watch that attached itself to Ben's wrist. And if you think about it in a way, the Omnitrix is a bit like a parasite, right? Because once it attaches to Ben's wrist, he can't take it off. So I guess in this original conceptualization of it, they wanted to dive deeper into that parasite-like form. As we can see here, it literally looks like there's like a spider or some sort of parasite attached to Ben's arm. Now, as we get into the aliens themselves, first and foremost, we have Digger, and Digger was the original Wild Mud in this original idea, if you will, for the aliens in Ben 10. One thing you'll notice about Digger is he definitely does kind of look like a mole when you look at his face. He obviously has a bit of a humanoid body, which is something you'll come to see with all of these different aliens, as apparently something that was originally wanted by the network or just someone in production was that they wanted to have all of the aliens be a humanoid form, which obviously is something that we did not see in the final version of the show, but it is something that came into play with the Ben 10 reboot, because obviously all of the aliens within the reboot are humanoid. But as you can see here, Digger is essentially a mole that I assume his power is that he was able to dig through the ground. As we can see his fist going down, creating some rock formations, I assume he was able to dig and burrow through the ground and travel that way, given that he is a mole essentially, and that's what moles do. Other than that, we don't really have much about their powers. It's more so just the designs themselves and a little bit of a description of them, if you will, but that's pretty much what we have for Digger. Next up, we have Dragonfly, which Dragonfly was obviously the original Stinkfly, as you can see here. Quite frankly, I am not a huge fan of this design. It just looks rather off to me. I just don't exactly know what to make of it. As for a lot of these designs, as we'll see them, I'm quite happy that they decided to move away from these and go for the designs that we ended up getting in the original series, because a lot of them just don't fit to me. They're kind of off-putting, and obviously this was a different conceptualization of Ben 10. They were going down a different path when they were making this, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't know if these would have been as successful as the aliens that we got in the final product, but obviously, as I said before, this is Stinkfly. He's a humanoid version of him, similar to what we got in the reboot. Other than that, power-wise, if he still has the goo shooting abilities that Stinkfly does in the original show, we have no idea. All we know is that his name was Dragonfly. Next up, we have the original Ghostfreak, which, as you can see here, is very different from the Ghostfreak that we got, and quite frankly, in my opinion, I find this Ghostfreak design to be a little bit disturbing to look at. I just feel like with a lot of these alien designs here, they probably realized that, yeah, these might not be the most suitable thing in the world for a children's animated series. They're a little bit too creepy and odd looking in some cases, which might be the reason why they moved on from them. Obviously, this form of Ghostfreak shares the same name as the original Ghostfreak that we got in the original series, or the final Ghostfreak, I should say. But other than that, there's really nothing else similar about this alien to the Ghostfreak that we got. From a power standpoint, I presume it's rather different as well. And honestly, it's rather unfortunate that we don't have a powers description to go with these aliens, because I'm very curious what this Ghostfreak does exactly. I assume he has, the ability to become invisible and maybe go through walls and stuff like that, but when you look at this Ghostfreak versus the Ghostfreak that we finally got in the original series, they're very different, and quite frankly, other than sharing the same name, I really don't see any similarities between the two. Now, on the other hand, the next alien we have is Gray Matter, and Gray Matter is obviously similar somewhat to the Gray Matter that we got in the final version of Ben 10. They both look to be little small gray aliens. From a power standpoint, who knows if this Gray Matter was super smart like the Gray Matter we got was in the final product. But if you take a deeper look at this Gray Matter, you'll notice something on his wrist. It is the Omnitrix, which is why I wanted to show you the Ben Tennyson in this version of Ben 10, because obviously it's the same exact Omnitrix symbol that was on that version of Ben Tennyson. I presume that all of the aliens would have had it somewhere on their bodies, just like we saw in the original version of Ben 10 and in every iteration of Ben 10 for that matter. But as we could see with all the designs we've been through so far, Gray Matter is the first one to actually have the Omnitrix on him. Maybe at this point in development they weren't exactly sure how they wanted to handle that, if they actually wanted to have the symbol somewhere on their bodies, because Gray Matter is the only one as of right now. We'll see this come into play later, but as of right now he's the only one that actually has the Omnitrix on. Next up we have Inferno, who is the pre-production version of Heat Blast. This kind of looks like something that would have come out of the MCU or maybe the DC universe of films. It looks like a superhero to me, like, the Human Torch or something like that just is able to throw fire. Obviously, it's not super different from Heat Blast, and Heat Blast is essentially, a walking flame body too, so it's not that different, but obviously Heat Blast is much more stylized, if you will. This just looks like a human body that's just covered in volcanic rock and has fire coming out of their body, so I'm not the biggest fan of this one, if I'm being honest. As you can see with him, it looks like he has some sort of shorts on his body. I assume maybe the orange on his torso on top of his shorts, maybe that's supposed to be where his Omnitrix symbol was going to be, but again, that part of the design wasn't fleshed out yet for this version of Heat Blast being Inferno. Next up we have Plant Guy, and Plant Guy is the pre-production version of Wildvine. Honestly, this is kind of giving me some Swampfire vibes. This really doesn't remind me of Wildvine, it reminds me a lot more of Swampfire, and the interesting thing about this is, if you guys recall, or rather I should say if you guys are paying attention, as we get through this list, there's going to be one alien from the original 10 that we got in the final show that isn't a part of the initial original 10 in pre-production, and obviously Wildvine's equivalent being Plant Guy is the alien that takes that alien's place. So as we go through the rest of them, you'll see which one is missing from this grouping. But next up we have Razor Jaws, which is the pre-production version of Ripjaws. Ripjaws is one of my favorite aliens. I love Ripjaws in general. Ben doesn't really have that many aquatic aliens other than Ripjaws and Water Hazard, and so I love Ripjaws. I love the design we got, but I'm gonna be honest here, Razor Jaws is probably the one alien from all of the aliens that we're gonna see here that I actually really like how it looks in pre-production, and quite frankly I wouldn't mind seeing an alien similar to this appear in a future series of Ben 10. Obviously Razor Jaws would probably have a different name if it ever did appear in Ben 10, given that we already have Ripjaws and they're a bit too similar, but nevertheless I just really like the design that is going on here. Next up we have Strong Guy, who obviously, as you can see, is the pre-production version of Forearms. Again, you can see when it comes to his chest that he has the Omnitrix kind of just going all over his chest, similar to what we saw with Forearms in his Alien Force and Ultimate Alien design. Maybe they took inspiration from this original idea in Strong Guy here, but obviously this versus the Forearms that we got, from a conceptual standpoint, they are similar in that they both have 4 arms, but obviously the head is distinctively different on Strong Guy versus Forearms, and obviously the rest of the coloring of this character is completely different from the Forearms that we got. Next up we have Upgrade, and just like with Ghostfreak, this is Upgrade in name, but honestly other than that I don't see any similarities between this Upgrade and the Upgrade that we actually got in the final version of the show. As we all know, Upgrade is essentially like a puddle of goo that can take over electronics, and this version of Upgrade doesn't look like he can do the same thing. This version of Upgrade kind of looks like a cyborg to me. Who knows from a powers perspective what he would have been able to do. I'm presuming maybe he would have been able to hack into technology, or he would have been good with electronics or something of this sort. This version of Upgrade is just a weird Frankenstein looking technomorph or something like that. I'm not a huge fan of it. And last up for the original 10 aliens in pre-production is Accelerate. And just like with Upgrade and with Ghostfreak, they share the same name, but they do look distinctively different from the actual Accelerate that we got in the final version. This alien's honestly reminded me a lot more of Fast Tracked than Accelerate. It's essentially just a blue Smurf, if you will, that's in a running suit essentially, and that's what Accelerate is here. Obviously the Accelerate we got is literally just like a dinosaur-like alien that's able to run fast because it has these balls on its feet. The thing with this Accelerate version 2 is I really don't see how this is an alien all that much. Essentially it looks like a blue human who's in a tracksuit, so not a huge fan of this design, and I think the Accelerate that we got in the final product is miles ahead better than this. And if you can tell from just my discussion of all these aliens, I'm not a huge fan of any of them, quite frankly. Other than Razor Jaws, I really don't like any of these aliens as opposed to what we got in the final product with the original 10 that we got in the original series of Ben 10. And I mentioned before when we were talking about Plant Guy that there is one alien that is missing from this grouping that was in the original 10 aliens for the original Ben 10, and that alien is Diamond Head. So it looks like in pre-production there was no such thing as Diamond Head, and somewhere down the line he was added in there to essentially replace what would end up being Wildvine in the original 10 selection of aliens. Anyways, that's all of the original Ben 10 aliens from pre-production. These were all made once again by Steve E. Gordon, and let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think about all of these designs. Do you like them, or are you like me that you kind of find them to be a bit unsettling and prefer the original Ben 10 aliens that we got in the actual show itself? If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from DC Network. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.